to be a Wildcat.
You actually have to be on cocaine to be on this podcast. Cocaine. Cocaine, really. Cocaine. Cocaine, really.
What's up, everybody? You are listening to yet another edition of Cocaine Willie. I am your commissioner, Bob Trollsby, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, the good chef, Andre here, and Fireball Matt Marchesini. Wow, just incredibly well executed, guys. Unlike the men's basketball team last night against the Utah Utes. But before we dive into the episode, we want to first give a shout out to our sponsor, Anime's Parlor. And this Topo Chico crack is brought to you by Anime's Parlor, located at 616 North 12th Street in the heart of Aggieville in Manhattan, Kansas. Anime's has been in business for 50 years and is an absolute must-visit destination in Aggieville on game days and school nights alike. Anime's is far and away my favorite destination, our favorite destination, everybody's favorite destination in Aggieville. And if you're not going, what's stopping you at this point? There shouldn't be anything stopping you other than maybe inclement weather, in which case just walk over there. Snow isn't that big of a deal.
Norovirus.
Or the norovirus, sure.
No, tuberculosis. That's
tuberculosis. Okay, yeah, that's the thing that's going around in Northeast Kansas right now. Yeah,
there's a bird flu as well. Keep your cats inside.
Yeah, if you've got the TB or the bird flu, definitely don't make your way to Anime's. But if you don't have either of those things, make your way down. Tomorrow night, Wednesday, February 19th, Anime's Trivia Smackdown happens all the time. You got to get down there. And then Friday, well, we're skipping a week of events here, but Saturday, February 22nd, you've got Build a Band featuring Barnacles, Cellar Dwellers, Cracker Jack Kevorkian. That's amazing. Did you know Lilac Attack and Snakehole are all performing? It's 6 brand new bands built to rock you. So I think this is me going out on a limb here, making an assumption. I think this is just 6 brand new, like, bands that have never played a gig before playing their first gig, which, as someone who's played multiple first gigs, it is always an adventure. So definitely would recommend making your way to the Parlor on February. Oh, shut up. Saturday, February 22nd. And be sure to tell them Cocaine Willie sent you. Well,
606.
That's a throwback. That's a deep cut. If you know, you know. All right, guys. Headlines for this week. We are going to talk about a couple of letdowns on the hoop side of things. We're going to talk about some of the football backfills on the coaching staff on the football side. And then I threw this in here as a wild card. Just wanted to get to everybody's thoughts before we get out of here on some of the proposed changes to the CFP that might be coming, with the SEC and the Big Ten getting 4 auto bids, and the Big 12 and the ACC getting 2, and the G5, I think, getting 1. It's going to be an absolute disaster. But let's start with men's basketball. Oh, God. So coming into this, K-State, hottest team in the country, coming off of a huge win against the Arizona Wildcats last week. You've got a back-to-back road trip against the BYU Cougars and the Utah Utes. And best case scenario, you go 1-1 in those games. You're still alive. You're still, I think, rocking it heading into what on paper should be a relatively easy home stretch, except for maybe Iowa State at the end of the season. But K-State goes 0-2. They drop the game to BYU, and BYU really kept K-State at arm's length the entire game. And then a Utah game where you get out rebounded 51-28. Utah, for all intents and purposes, should have boat raced us in that game, but also didn't play super great. And K-State just kind of got lucky, I think, in a lot of situations where maybe they shouldn't have, normally wouldn't have gotten lucky in. But you dropped that game by 5 to Utah last night. And now you're in a situation where you went 0-2. And this margin for error that you had coming into this weekend where, if you go 1-1, you still are alive. If you go 0-2, things are looking pretty dismal. And if you go 2-0, you're riding high. You've got an 8-game win streak at that point, and you're heading into a relatively easy home stretch in conference play. But they went 0-2, and that's awful. And we can't really have that now. So Martin Ferrer is now
-5, -10,
-5. It's very bad, is what I'm getting at. So
Yeah.
let's talk about this road trip to Utah.
Yeah, it was brutal. It was really brutal. I mean, BYU, me and Matt talked about it at the end of the Arizona game when we watched it live on Playback TV. If you haven't done so, get over there and subscribe because we do watch these games. It's a good time. But we talked about it at the end of the game, Matt, and we said 1-1 really would be nice, and you can't really lose to Utah. Like a BYU loss is kind of acceptable at this point. That's a what is that, a quad 1 loss? Because BYU is right there mid 30s in the net ranking. But losing to Utah is you just can't have that. You had to split somehow and keep the momentum going, because I think this is kind of a momentum killer. I mean, the home pop is still going to be there. I don't think people are necessarily giving up yet, but you like Bob said, the margin for error is gone. There's nothing. You have to run the table. But that Utah trip was brutal. BYU really put it to us. It was just a style that we weren't ready for, and the energy was lacking. When you go down, it's not too dissimilar to what Arizona State did to us, but we had the fight, and we were just a way better team. BYU is too talented of a team to get down 12-24 or whatever the margin was at one point. And then, so that game, you saw the writing on the wall. I think you got it, down to 8 maybe one time. But after that, it was just lights out. But Utah, you said, Bob, I disagree with you. You said that Utah should have boat raced us. I think Utah, outside of one player, played out of their minds. That was the best Utah has ever played. Even when they beat Kansas, the one guy for Utah, their leading scorer, went off versus Kansas, but versus Kansas State, you had a guy that was shooting 35%, stroking 88% from the free throw line, and made 13 of them. And then you had a guy that's a football player. I mean, let's be honest, he's a football player, grabbed, 10 rebounds and dropped 22 on you. So there's no excuse, but Utah really played out of their mind. And when they needed it, when Kansas State was putting the pressure, their best player finally showed up and hit a dagger 3 on you. So for me, I think Utah just played out of their mind, and two of our 3 best players kind of reverted back to what happened last year when we'd have our big 3 and only one of them show up. So it was bad. I want to see what Matt's got to gripe about.
To gripe about? You think that Utah played their best game of the season last night? And I feel like
in terms of like more contributors than most.
Okay. Here's my first thought. So you mentioned the quad 1 situation. So last night was a quad 1 loss for K-State. Utah
the Utah one was too?
Utah is a quad 1 loss. It would have been a quad 1 win for K-State.
Interesting.
The sad part about last night, you could have put a lot of different uniforms on the opposing team, and K-State was going to lose that game if it was in Utah, if it was at sea level.
Africa.
It was really sad to see just the effort. The effort I felt on the defensive end was so poor. From thinking about it from a rebounding perspective, there are a lot of contributors in this game because we could not get an offensive rebound to save our life. You think about it. I mean, you have a lot of those offensive rebounds that are the football guy, Caleb Lohner is his name. But anyway, you got out rebounded on the offensive end 21-6. You take away just a couple of those by showing some more effort, more physicality, more intensity, trying to rebound the basketball. That's my opinion. I mean,
no, you're right. You're right. But the way the refs were calling it, we had no chance to be more physical.
I kept seeing this thing about the refs and like, I felt the game was called differently than the BYU game. And it was called different than the Arizona game, which is going to happen because it's different refereeing crews, of course. But I don't think it was egregiously called at all. I think we put ourselves in situations where we had to foul because we had, I would say, a lack of intensity on the defensive end and a lack of focus on the defensive end that contributes to some of the ticky-tack fouls. I mean, I don't think it was necessarily the way it was called that takes away the physicality, but if it is 21-6, you get, if it's 18, you take 3 more rebounds from them. This is a 5-point game. You put yourself in a situation to where the game is closer than 5 points. I was just disappointed with, despite the fact that Utah shot 38% in this game, it was the second chance opportunities that they had because of the way we just didn't have physicality. And yeah, the foul trouble, like, Ugo's a tough player for me because he shows strides. Like this was his best game from, I would say, a defensive perspective blocking. I mean, he had what, 3-4, rim protecting.
Yeah, I think he had like 5 blocks.
Yeah, but his ability to rebound shocks me.
It is bad.
That is something that if he is somebody who is going to be staying with this team next year, his biggest offseason improvement has to be positioning to get rebounds because it's not there. And he had a big miss with the baseline out of bounds that Utah had that led to the alley-oop, to get them, in the second half. This was not Utah's best game. We could say that probably from the free throw line, they're 23 of 30, but they took advantage of their opportunities. And in the grand scheme of things, could we have been more aggressive on the offensive end? I know we tried, we got some offensive fouls, but I think they were dumb offensive fouls. And, you didn't get as many opportunities in the first half to get to the line because we did not have a presence inside, and we weren't taking opportunities on the outside to drive in to get blocks called like we did in the second half. So obviously, I've seen 2 Utah games this year, not like I'm watching the Utah Utes. But there were a lot of opportunities for K-State last night. And I think the biggest key out of this whole deal was they just looked out. They were out physicaled by this team, which is disappointing because I think in this 6-game stretch where they won these games, they were more physical than all of the other teams that we played. And this Utah team did not necessarily look scary on paper. And they looked out. They were outplayed. I mean, they really were.
I agree with you that the physicality wasn't there compared to how we were rushing double teams and stripping the ball from people and getting physical on the inside, taking the ball with turnovers and getting into passing lanes and stuff like that. And on the rebounding tip, there were some things that were lacking, but I think a lot of that was conducive to the referees calling the game the way it was. I am totally in agreement with you that the game was called exactly how it was. They started from first tip until the end of the game. It was called the exact same way. And I cannot have a gripe with that. But the way it was called, because it was making it so we couldn't be as physical on crashing rebounds and doing that stuff, it led to Utah being able to do it. And it just, because we got so many fouls early in the game, David Kazan can't be nearly as physical. Coleman Hawkins, he's already lacking in the physicality department. He definitely can't do it when he's got 3 fouls early in the second half. It was tough. Moby Ike Garuka, the exact same way. He is the pinnacle. He's what that football player for Utah was for our team, but he couldn't do it because he had 4 fouls with 12 minutes left in the second half. How is he supposed to be able to play the way Moby plays if he's in foul trouble? And Ugo's the same way. He needs to learn to rebound, grab the ball. You're 7'3", grab the ball with extended arms and grab it instead of trying to tip the ball out constantly. It was just, we never had a chance with the way the game was being called. And that I have no problem with it because it was both ways. But when your two of your 3 best players basically no call, no show because they were in foul trouble or they were just way off, Coleman Hawkins, we never had a chance. Doug tried to do everything in his power. He did blow a layup that would have tied the game, but I mean, that happens.
Yeah, I just, you can say that.
And I'm the king of saying foul the hell out of them. Keep fouling. But we fouled the right guys. They drained the free throws. The dude was 35%, and he was the culprit that was constantly getting fouled. And I had no problem with them fouling because that's taking away possessions from them that they could score the ball. He just happened to drain almost 90% of his free throws.
Yeah, I mean,
what do you do?
The free throw piece. If you have the Utah team that shot free throws like KU, yes, it's a different game.
We win that game by 10 if they shoot like they normally shoot. I swear to God, we do.
They were 23 of 30. They shot 76%. So you take away
they're 63 on the season as a team. That's so bad. Yeah,
I mean, you take away 5 of those, it's a tie game. That's about their season average. So I don't know. I was way more disappointed about the Utah game than the BYU game. I know we really haven't talked about the BYU game that much. But I mean, this road trip is an absolute disaster if you think about it, because, I would have taken 1-1 with this weekend. I really never thought we were going to win at BYU. That's a tough place to play no matter what. We're going to see that with KU tonight. I mean, I'll be surprised if KU wins tonight because of how bad they are on the road. But also, I mean, BYU is a tough place to play. I believe we won the second half in that game. We're so poor in the first half. I mean, and when you're down 20 points in the first half, yet again, and things aren't working, it's hard to come back from that, especially in a tough environment. So, we just saw a lot of, kind of the old non-conference schedule just come back in these 2 games. I mean, Coleman Hawkins looking like a dumpster fire. Feel like that's being kind. I used to think Doug was the guy that ran this team in the grand scheme of things. Like, how good this team can be is how Doug McDaniel plays. But Coleman Hawkins is the key for this team. He is struggling on the offensive end. He had 7 points last night, but he got into foul trouble. But just not as much of a presence in this game. He looked labored at the end of this game too. He looked like he looked tired. He was kind of limping around a little bit. So I have some concern with that. Thankfully we have a 6-day kind of time off, but Coleman is the cog to this thing because, Doug, he went 5 of 13 in this game. And, he's had better games. I mean, he had 13 points last night, which is fine.
He battled his ass off.
He did. He played, I think, for the type of game that was moving here, he did what he had to do to try and keep this team, afloat with a chance to win in the end. But I was really disappointed in Coleman these 2 games. Just really looked like early season Coleman Hawkins. And that's not what you can have when your team is basically at sink or swim mode to make it to the NCAA tournament. I don't think not, there's a chance that, you can go to the NCAA tournament. I don't believe it with the way that this team is played. They can win their home games, but this team could easily lose at UCF. I mean, they could easily lose at Cincinnati. I didn't even think about Cincinnati. I don't have as much faith I have more faith in this team than I did on January 3rd, but I have less faith in this team and being able to come back from some adversity like this, where you had these expectations and just not there. I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's what me and Bob were talking about before we started up. The path to the NCAA tournament, I think the at-large is gone. I mean, we could play our way maybe successfully if we run the table and do well in Kansas City into the play-in in Dayton. But the only way we make it into the field is if in Kansas City, if we win the whole thing. And I just, running 4 straight games versus quality opponents is going to be very, very difficult to do. It's tough. It's sad because, like you were saying with Coleman Hawkins, I think he is the most important player on the team because he does so much for the team that in filling the gaps in the stat sheet with helping Doug with the assist and helping score when David Gasson's maybe not going and finding David Gasson, getting him going. He really does help David Gasson's game so much. But I was thinking about it today, like Coleman Hawkins, I mean, as much as like he made his money in college, which he is a good college player, but he has no chance of playing professional basketball. I mean, that's not even a dig. That's just facts. He has no offensive bag. He can't get around average defenders. He has no lift. He has no jumper. It's tough. And I mean, when he's on, he's good, and he's a really good college player. But we need that more than these no-show games because we will lose almost all of them if he is a no-show.
One of the things I want to talk about defensively with this team, and it's something I've noticed the last couple of games, not just the Utah game, but the BYU game too. It felt like there were multiple times on defense where the other team could just dribble down the base, like on the baseline, and get a bucket off the baseline. Like there's no baseline defense whatsoever for this K-State team, at least in the last couple of games. It's just something I've noticed. And I mean, I don't know if that's been happening all season, but it was really apparent to me, especially in the Utah game, but also in the BYU game. And I don't know if there's just a scouting report out there on like, hey, this team cannot guard the baseline whatsoever. But I feel like there were at least 4 or 5 buckets last night that could have been prevented if you had someone help down on the baseline instead of, sticking to their assignment, which maybe that helped better when they switched to more of a zone look in the second half. But dude, that is egregious. I mean, if you can just clean up a couple of those things here and there, and you guys have already talked about some of the other things, but like, this is a game that's won and lost in the margin, just like football. And if you're missing in the margins, like baseline defense, whatever it might be, that's the difference between being an at-large bid and being K-State right now, which you pretty much have to win out at this point and win in Kansas City, win the whole thing in Kansas City.
I mean, I'll also state this. I think one of the other disappointments this past weekend was CJ Jones. As a guy, he played 19 minutes yesterday. He was all right on the defensive side, got into some foul trouble towards the end, 2 points. I mean, from a scorer perspective, if you're going to spell him in situations to where, I mean, Doug McDaniel played 38 minutes in this game, but if you're going to play CJ Jones in kind of a combo guard situation, where he's coming in for Brendan Hawson, to kind of maybe spark something on the defensive end, you have to be a little bit more of a threat offensively in this game. He was 1 of 4. He didn't have a great game at BYU either. He's a guy who showed some good flashes in this 6-game streak of being able to come in and give productive minutes. So I think that's the biggest, thinking about disappointments for these 2 games. Moby was not great in these games. Has showed a lot of obviously great flashes in the 6-game win streak. I mean, maybe you could say that about every single player that was out on the floor, except for maybe Brendan Howson. But even Brendan,
he struggled in the first half versus
and
Utah.
he hasn't been playing as well defensively, I don't think, as he did during that 6-game stretch.
I don't think he was as good in this 2-game stretch. Now that we look at BYU again, they're a quad 1 team. Like BYU is an NCAA tournament team, right? And so BYU took advantage of some poor defensive situations we put ourselves into, and they made their shots. Like that was the key thing here. I feel for the Utah game, we weren't as great on the defensive end and man-to-man. Utah had shots, like they had open opportunities and failed to make them, which I think is the big difference, obviously, between the BYU and Utah games. My biggest Jerome Tang kind of misstep is in the second half, you move to the zone for 2 possessions and Utah's flummoxed. They have no idea. We did not play zone, I think, for the last 2 minutes of that game. They stayed directly in the man-to-man. And I think that could have been an opportunity to maybe put Utah in a situation they saw earlier in the half, didn't have success on the offensive end in those zone possessions instead of playing man-to-man. So that could have been an opportunity. Who knows? Again, it was a disappointment all around, right? We could probably.
The only issue I have with the zone, like it looked good. Those 2 possessions, it looked good. Like we got a defensive stop. But the longer you play zone, we were already struggling on the glass. You're going to have even worse player pickups on trying to get defensive rebounds if everybody's playing zone and then you look for the basket and nobody knows where their man is. We were getting butchered on the glass. It's hard to play zone for a long stretches of time and not give up rebounds if we're not playing zone all the time.
Sure.
That's the only issue I have.
I agree with that. I don't know. It's hard. I mean, we scored 69 points in this game and lost. Our path to 69 did not work in this game. So, yeah. I
had a chance to tie it. Doug blew it.
You had a chance to tie it. Even Brendan Howson had it was not a wide open 3, but Brendan Howson had an opportunity to tie it. Utah played it out the end of the game, and let us shoot the 3. So again, I mean, it's a good win for Utah. They swept the Kansas schools this weekend. I mean, that's for a team that wasn't necessarily picked to win, in the conference this year. I mean, Utah wasn't picked very high. I don't know, they're good. I mean, they're decent.
The whole state of Utah might sweep the entire state of Kansas. Depending on what happens with this BYU KU game, but
it's quite possible.
So the road ahead, you've got a flailing Arizona State team coming back to Bram. So you're coming back on the 23rd. So that's a Sunday game actually, which is interesting. 2:00. I think is that the first Sunday game since non-conference? That's got to be for us.
Then we do then we were on a whole stretch of like this weird schedule where it just flipped and we're doing Sundays and Wednesdays and all kinds of weird stuff.
But yeah, you've got Arizona State at home. Hopefully, you've got to win out. You've got to win every single one of these. But Arizona State and then UCF, you turn around and play them on the road, which isn't an easy place to play. We've seen KU drop games there in the last 2 years, and a much better KU team last year dropped a game there than the team this year that I think won that matchup. But and then Colorado, Cincinnati, and Iowa State, and you just flip flop home and road for the next 5. So and then Kansas City. So I think
win out. And what is our record? 18 and 13.
18 and 13 if you win out, and then you've got to hope to win at least 2 or 3 games in Kansas City, if not win the whole thing, to get to the. I do think that there is an optics thing about getting to 20 wins. I think there is with a lot of people nationally, and maybe the committee doesn't look at it that way, but you would get I think you'd be 5-5 in quad 1.
How many opportunities? Yeah, I was going to ask Matt how many quad one opportunities we got left.
Yeah.
I think just the
Iowa State game.
Iowa State game. I don't think Cincinnati is a quad one.
No, I don't think any of them are.
But Utah was?
Utah was because they beat KU. And the quad one. So for us,
top
a quad,
60 on the road, right?
Yeah. So they had just snuck in. It might be top 50 on the road.
I think
so then we would be 4-6 right now because we were 4-5 going into last night.
I think if you somehow win the next 5 games and you beat Iowa State in the last game of the year, there will somehow be it'll be.
We're in Dayton if that's the record.
There's a conversation that could be had. Why did we have to lose to LSU and Wichita State? I mean, or we give up the damn TCU game. It's incredible.
Why'd we have to lose the chore? He would make a difference, right? I mean, we can't do that, Matt. We can't go back in time. That's not how time works.
Thanks, Chef.
A chore. I had forgotten, all but forgotten about him.
Ahoy, ahoy.
All right. Women's basketball, pivoting over to that one. So they get drubbed by Oklahoma State. We've already talked about that. 30-point drubbing on the road in Stillwater. But they bounce back in another road game, back-to-back road games. They bounce back in the matchup against Cincinnati after a week off, effectively. You get 90 to 53. You kind of beat the brakes off of them. And then you win against UCF, 30-point dub there. So back-to-back wins against Cincinnati and UCF. And then you turn around at West Virginia and you lose 70 to 57. But that's of the two of the last 2 matchups you've had with top 25 teams you dropped.
Yeah. West Virginia hasn't lost at home this year, has it?
No, they're 14 or 15-0 at home.
Yeah, that was daunting. They've got one of the best guards in the Big 12. She's lightning
Great
quick.
team.
It was
all credit to them. Yeah,
they're solid. I mean, it really hurts because if we would have got that game thinking into the future of what is about to turn around the corner, you possibly get Ioka Lee back. Maybe for this next game, you would have had a ton of momentum going into her return and still putting yourself in the title race. I don't know where it's at with TCU. I think we're a game and a half back.
We are half game back.
Wow, and you've got the tiebreaker on them, so
half game back. I mean, it's just
pray for a TCU loss. We've got 1 game in hand over them too, so they have yet to play. They need to play a 15th conference game.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking they were a game and a half back because if they win, we're a game and a half down.
Yeah, so they play tomorrow at Arizona State, and then they've got West Virginia after that.
So it's just man. But the future, the team is still solid. It's just we're having these hiccups where the ball is just not going in the hoop, and that's the first time we've seen not really clean, crisp basketball where you're having multiple turnovers. I think we have versus West Virginia, maybe close to 21.
21.
You're not going to, in the women's game, you're not going to win a lot of games having that many turnovers because the possessions are so stretched out. Teams are, you're going to get out and run on occasion, but you got to value the ball. You've got to be able to get shots up and not have these discrepancies where you're turning the ball over, letting them run out and get easy baskets. You've got to be able to set your defense. So I'm looking for that to turn around in these next coming games and getting Ioka Lee back into the swing of things. Because I think as much as we talked at the beginning of the season of, not letting her get worn out and having short minutes, I think that might come back to bite us because she just hasn't played a lot of basketball this season. So it's going to be interesting to see what we can do with this team and Ioka Lee's return.
Yeah, I think they're having her come back for this game against KU will be very nice because with the way we played KU in Lawrence, I'm never going to say there's an easy game by any means, but you want to have one game before you host Baylor. And this could be a good opportunity to get her kind of situated, kind of get your offense back in gear before you host Baylor. Yesterday's game was disappointing. I'm not going to put anything against West Virginia, because at the end of the day, they do a really good job of getting turnovers against the defensive or against the other team. We had 21 turnovers yesterday. And so you pair that with not shooting the ball very well, really not being as good, as we've seen from the 3-point line. It's a recipe for kind of disaster, especially on the road. So, West Virginia is a really good team. JJ Quinterly she should be all Big 12. I could easily see that. Just for the way that she's such a good defensive player, but she has these really good spurts on the offensive end where she's really good. And I wouldn't necessarily want to play West Virginia again in the Big 12 tournament. I know we did last year, but 3 winnable games coming up, KU, the Baylor game, Baylor's on a heater right now, but again,
got to pack the Bram.
You have to pack the Bram for that game.
Bram the Bram.
And then you're on the road at Iowa State, and that's going to be a tough game, especially against Audie Crooks. But this is kind of the matchup we were really wanting to see in Manhattan, of Ayoka Lee versus Audie Crooks, and just see how those two centers kind of go together. So it is imperative, if you want to potentially sneak and tie for the conference championship, you have to go 3-0. You got to knock Baylor down. You got to hope Baylor beats TCU, which I'm pretty sure they play. I'm pretty sure they play like right after us or right before. Anyway, and yeah, so you just got to continue with 3. You got to keep with the 3 losses. You go 3-0 and potentially sniff out a conference championship. I will say this. I know we have some shows before the Big 12 tournament, but I'm excited for the women's Big 12 tournament this year. I think especially K-State healthy, or at least getting Ayoka Lee back, who knows from a health perspective, what she is. But, K-State, I hope that we have really great crowds in Kansas City for the women for those games. Because the women's tournament is the week before the men. The women's Big 12 championship game could be, I believe, the Saturday we play Iowa State. I think that they could correlate, which wouldn't be great. But yeah, I'm excited for the next 3 games for the women. It'll be interesting.
Where do we stand on? Nationally, I think we're probably going to drop to around I don't know.
We dropped to 15 today in the coaches poll. We are. You're
teetering on not hosting.
You are. That's why you have to really beating a ranked Baylor team at home really helps. That I think will help with. You kind of have to cement yourself, I think, in the back half of this group. So in the 4 seed region, and. Baylor's 19th. They go on the road and beat a 15th ranked K-State team. They're in the top 16. West Virginia quite very much could be in the top 16. So it's like the Baylor game is like an absolute must win if you want this team to host and in Manhattan for the regional. And then when the NCAA tournament comes around, you never know. And the Big 12, here's the thing. The Big 12 tournament will also provide some opportunities too. So, if you're in a situation where you're, potentially get a double bye, I think you're in the top 4, you get a double bye. That helps, from a rest perspective. But then you can go up against TCU again. You go up against Baylor again. You can get West Virginia again, Utah, Oklahoma State. Some of the top teams in the Big 12. So, but they're at the skin of their teeth with this. So there's no margin for error anymore.
That is the message of K-State basketball in general. There's no margin for error anymore.
I hope I will also say this. I hope Jeff Mittie takes this season and looking in the 2025 season and looks at really how bad our non-conference schedule was. And you look at the women's game, and this is the one thing compared to the men that I think the women's game does really well is they schedule difficult games in the non-conference. They're the top schools schedule tough games in the non-conference.
We had Duke this year.
We had Duke in a neutral site
that's it, though.
game, and you played DePaul in a neutral site game. You have to schedule better to not, especially with how the Big 12 is now being perceived. The Big 12 is not the conference that it used to be for women's basketball. And so you have to find some resume wins now in the non-conference. And so my hope is, you're going to be reloading next year for sure. But you have some talent coming in. We've seen the success that Jeff Mitty's got from the transfer portal. I think next year you have to look at scheduling tougher in the non-conference. So you basically have your conference being disrespected because of, it is like the conference is being disrespected. Is that rightful or not? Who knows? But, we'll see during the NCAA tournament.
I will say an underrated win on this schedule that people aren't talking about is there's a win against a 13-1 in Big East play Creighton team.
Creighton, I knew you were going to say Creighton.
21-4 overall.
Yeah.
You got to win against Texas A&M. A&M's not good this year, but who would have known before the season if they were going to be good or not?
That's what basically schedule making is. The past Mitty has tried to do things with the neutral site versus Wisconsin. He's done games like that, but there's like Matt was saying, just with the perception of the conference, it's hard to get, trying to get multiple SEC teams and multiple freaking ACC teams. And, I don't really follow a lot of women's Big Ten, but USC, good luck trying to get like teams like USC and Ohio State on your schedule just littered throughout. It's hard to do that unless you're like one of the top 5 teams in the country where they're wanting to play South Carolina every freaking week. Somebody wants a piece of you. So, it's just all about the perception, but you've got to win the games in front of you and then hope. Really, the conference, it's getting localized in terms of like these conferences. You've got to worry about your own. And the conference as a whole is good, but you're not going to have those high ends. But you've got to dominate your conference. Really, that's what it is. So these stinker games where you're laying down 50 points, can't have them.
Yeah, it'd be nice. It'd be nice to have like a Tennessee on the schedule. I agree with you, Matt. I don't know if it's feasible, but maybe in one of these non-conference preseason feast week tournaments or something, you're able to get someone like that on the schedule. But
yeah, I think you need to look at just scheduling some teams from some bigger conferences. If you want to bring in mid-range teams, that's fine. From the Big Ten or the SEC or obviously the ACC, but I think you just have to get a perception that your non-conference schedule is better, and you get yourself some resume wins. I'm going to say the same thing for the men too, but does losing at home to LSU hurts, but if you lose to Oregon, who's 19th in the country or something like that, you're playing better teams. Like those losses sting, but the perception isn't that it's a bad loss. And, the Wichita State one, I don't count in this because from a regional perspective, this was a 4-year contract we were on with them. But I heard the rumor
wasn't it the same with the LSU though? Because we had a home and home with them, and we also had the neutral with them.
We had a home and home with them. Yes.
Yeah. So we're just finishing
correct.
that out.
Correct. I agree. I'm just saying, I think some of these really bad teams that we played this year, how are they really helping us? The LSU, we're finished. I just think non-conference scheduling mindsets have to change for K-State. The rumor of the Indiana one that came out this week could be a pretty interesting one, depending on how that goes. But
the thing is, though, we complained about this last year where we were playing these teams, and all we said was just if you're going to schedule them, beat the hell out of them. And we did do that this year, but we've also lost some stinkers too. But we didn't expect LSU to be absolute shit. Well, I mean, I didn't expect LSU to be shit.
I don't know. I didn't care about LSU until they came, so I didn't even look at that.
You lost Sam on there.
You lose, and it's also. I mean, if we're playing in the Caribbean every year, we're screwed unless we're playing in Battle for Atlantis. I mean, yeah, the mindset. Next year we're playing in Kansas City. I can't remember who we're playing, like who the CBE tournament or the Hall of Fame tournament is in Kansas City, but the coaching staff wanting to go to the Caribbean every year. If we're not getting picked for Battle for Atlantis, what's the point? Like, you know, you lose to Liberty. I mean, I'm not a basketball coach. I don't know the ins and outs. You know, you're absolutely right. Like, you beat the teams that you play by 30 points and your RPI goes up, but you can't be losing some of these games. And I would rather lose against a good, you know, really good team, or bring in, you know, a good team to Bramlage. I don't know.
But those teams aren't doing that. Those teams are not doing that. Like, look at the schedules for like all these high major teams. They're not going on the road before non-conference. They're playing in neutrals in these tournaments, and that's it.
Because they don't have to.
That's what I'm saying. Like, trying to say that you want Oregon to come to Bram, that shit is not happening.
Okay.
It won't. These teams will not agree with it unless it's a home and home, and it's very rare that we'll get teams to do that. It was rare that we got LSU to do it. An SEC team to sign off on a home and home, that it just doesn't happen. It doesn't. I mean, we have to get into these. We have to be good enough in the previous season to get invited to these good Maui, Atlantis, somewhere like that, where you're playing quality opponents on neutrals, but trying to get a home and home with the team just on a 1-year term, because we had to get that LSU game a home and home and a neutral, because we played them neutral somewhere, I think in the Caribbean, but we had to get those in advance, and it had to be a home and home. It's not like we're just going to invite, hey, North Carolina, why don't you come on down to Bramlage Coliseum and, you know, have a disadvantage. It's not going to happen. It won't.
I'm just saying. They got to do a better job.
I want it too. I would almost, if you're going to play these, like you said, don't go to the Caribbean no more. Don't do it. I'd rather you go to sign up for all road games. Just go on the road to these teams. Say, hey, we'll sacrifice it. We'll go on the road, because it's not going to hurt you.
Hey, I'm not going to compare us to KU, but you look at KU's non-conference schedule and the way that Bill Self puts a schedule together. Their schedule, whether it prepares them well enough for Big 12 play is, you know, they have road woes from the beginning of the season, but you have a home and home at North Carolina. You have an Oakland team that made it to the NCAA tournament last year. They went to the fucking Sweet 16, right? You have
okay.
No, but I'm telling you, like, you set up a neutral site game against Duke. You have a game at Creighton. Well, that's a Big East, which we're not going to have anymore. But you have you have a home and home against Missouri, and you have NC State, who went to the Final Four. Like that I'm not saying every game in the non-conference has to be, you know, against a Power 5 team, but there's a point where, as a fan, if you want K-State to be perceived, like it's all about perception, right? You want K-State to be perceived in the Big 12 as a good basketball program, you know, and we've shown that. But I don't necessarily agree that we can do that by playing the type of non-conference schedule that we do. It doesn't give you any clout in the beginning of the season. And we could probably argue that it didn't necessarily help us get ready for Big 12 play, which is how I think a non-conference schedule should be. So no, is Oregon going to come in? Who knows? I threw Oregon out there as an example, just as you have a top 25 team that, you know, you look at preseason top 25, who you could bring in, who's a name. That's all I'm asking for.
I feel like Oregon's at least attainable. I mean, there's a relationship there too with Dana Altman. He's previous.
I mean,
head coach. Like
I say Oregon. Okay,
that's
Wisconsin.
Doable. That's doable.
Okay,
Illinois, Missouri,
Iowa. Like there are regional name programs that you could look at.
Do a 3-year home neutral with Missouri.
Just saying.
Had a Nebraska last year, got smashed.
Yes, I agree. Yes. But again, I mean,
get your team to gel earlier than
I feel like Nebraska and Wichita State are in the same realm, like this regional, like, you know, historical team that we've played before. I think there are opportunities where you can improve your non-conference schedule and get your team more prepared. And if they are road games, that's great. Like, you know, if you're signing home and homes and you want to start, you know, these games on the road, fine. But I think I just believe that our non-conference schedule wasn't a great schedule to begin with. We didn't win the games that we needed to, but we're not playing against tough competition that gets you ready for Big 12 play in a year where probably the Big 12, other than, you know, Houston and Arizona, like some of the top teams, it's not as perceived as high as the SEC, but you're doing your preparation at the beginning of Big 12 play. And
it certainly doesn't help when you're beating Mississippi Valley State by 18 points and not 30, because that's the whole idea too with those quad 4 wins.
You're RPI farming,
but that's what we wanted last year.
I understand that, and I think we're seeing like this year that we didn't win the games that we needed to, but we didn't play against tough competition in the non-conference to get us ready for the start of Big 12 play.
I agree.
Arizona was 4-5 coming into conference play, and now they're, you know, top 15 team in the country.
I want to look at Arizona's schedule. I'm just pulling it up.
But they were all neutrals. They were all neutrals.
But against good competition.
No, I agree. But we have to be better the previous year to get invited to those things. We're going to keep getting to the Paradise Jam.
Yeah. Well, I agree. But Arizona, I have to pull up Arizona's schedule because they're one here. At Wisconsin.
Okay.
Took an L. Yeah. Duke at home. They scheduled a home and home with Duke.
Yeah.
Or Oklahoma and West Virginia were in the UCLA at home. Like
UCLA's ass.
UCLA was 24th.
And that's a rivalry.
UCLA was 24th at the time, and Arizona lost by 3.
Yeah, that's a Pac-12 rivalry that they used to play every year.
The other teams that they're playing, Canisius, they're in the MAC. Old Dominion, Davidson made it to the NCAA tournament.
Samford
made it to the NCAA tournament. Like, we're not playing New Orleans.
Davidson, Steph Curry ain't walking through that door.
They're not playing Mississippi Valley State. They're not playing Central Arkansas. Like, that's.
I get it.
Okay.
I think the thing is with scheduling, because I've got 4 minutes and I'm going to get out here. This is the last thing I'll say on the scheduling. It's, you know, I think it's got to be both ways. We can all pipe dream about who we want to play and all this stuff, but you've got to have it where the other teams are interested in coming here or whatever. And if you can't, you got to do what the strategy was that Iowa State did to get their RPI 2 years ago, where you just play the shitty teams, but you beat them by 100. Just do it. Be good. Like Bob said.
Yeah.
Be good.
We're not going to talk football tonight. We've got 4 minutes, 3 minutes now, and we've got a couple of good questions I want to get to. Tyler Maneth, what are your top 3 dream non-con opponents, men and women's neutral court tourney matchup?
Okay. For women, I'll go South Carolina, Obviously, I would want to see just the levels. I want to see the levels. I'll give one and one. And then men, I would want to see. That's a Florida. No, we already played Florida. I was going to say Miami too. Did we play them in a neutral last year?
We played them in the tournament. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Miami was a neutral. We already did the Big East stuff. Pac-12, no. You already said Oregon 100 times. There's really nothing.
I got my two if you want to keep thinking.
Yeah, give me one more.
LSU for the women, bring Kim Mulkey back. And
hell yeah.
UConn for the men.
Oh,
okay.
Damn, UConn for the men is actually kind of so. Oh, I know what my Syracuse for the men.
Syracuse would be a good one too.
Syracuse would be a fun matchup.
For me, it's on the men's side, it's Wisconsin. We need to avenge the demons from the 2 NCAA tournament losses. One with Beasley and two with Poland, if we're counting it that way.
Yeah.
Women's, I think it'd be fun to do UConn again. We had UConn here. When I was a student, if I remember right, we had UConn here.
Yeah, we got trounced.
I don't think we did did we do a home and home, or was it just?
Yeah, we did. We played in stores too. Yeah, we got
because they came here, which I was a little surprised by at that point. But I like the LSU call. I'm gonna steal that one from you.
LSU is a good one.
Yeah. I like the Oregon call out. Bring Dana home. All right, we've got 1 minute left before Chef leaves. We're going to go ahead and get out of here. That's going to do it for us today. Once again, shout out to the sponsor, Anime's Parlor, located at 616 North 12th Street in the heart of Aggieville. And be sure to tell them Cocaine Willie sent you when you stop by there. And, we're the K-State representative on the College Huddle, which is the largest community of fan-driven content in the nation. Check them out at College Huddle or thecollegehuddle.com and follow them on social media at College Huddle. Once again, also shout out to anybody who's in the comments right now. We didn't get to all the comments. We had a packed show and we were running on a tight deadline, which normally we do not, but Chef had to throw the curveball and get out of here at 8:30 Central Time. So we didn't get to everybody's comments, but I do want to recognize Justin Hall, Andrew Bro, and Tyler Maneth for popping into the chat there. So yippos to those who know for two of you. And Justin, you're baller stats.
Baller stats.
He's always here. And then last but not least, you can follow the show at Cocaine Willie on YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, or Instagram, or follow the show follow us individually. I'm at Bob Trollsby. Chef is at Chef Andre Napier, and Fireball Matt is at Matt Marchesini. Chef.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug, baby.
We are all coke and no joke. Wildcat country.
Let's
ride.
Let's ride. I'll see you boys.
Bye.
See ya.